Good evening, folks. Red County Blue Nation, Stephen Rorick, Jim McMahon with our distinguished guest tonight, Len Arigo. Matt Miles was going to be our guest tonight, but he's tied up in the ice skating rink down in the southeastern part of the United States trying to get to his home in Florida. So we wish him the best of travels. And with that being said, Len, how are you this evening?
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me.
You bet. Thank you for coming. We do appreciate it.
Yeah, right on, Lenny. Thank you.
Len, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would?
Sure. My background is, first of all, I spent about 6 years in the military. I was a finance officer in the Army, and I was a captain. And my first assignment, believe it or not, I was a government auditor.
Oh, really?
Okay, and the type of auditing I did, it's different than, say, a financial audit. It's an operational audit. So in the military is full of, in fact, all the government's full of policies and procedures and how to do things. And so as a government auditor, I would go into different areas and I would audit them based upon policies and procedures. If there was some type of investigation. So for example, a trooper flipped a Jeep, as an example, and they want to know exactly what happened. I would go in and I would investigate it and I'd write a report. If I went into an area, an operational area, I might go into, say, a supply area of a unit, and I would find out if they're doing things the way they're supposed to, and I would write a report. So it's an operational audit is what it is. So I did that for a while, but probably the most significant thing I did in the military, I was called like the central accounting officer at Fort Carson, and I did all the non-appropriated fund accounting for, and this is any accounting that doesn't come down to where you get governmental money appropriations. It would be things like the officers club, the NCO club, the liquor store, the golf course, the recreational centers, the child care nursery, anything. The morale, they called it morale, welfare, and support.
And so you did that all at Fort Carson?
I did, and
wow.
And I had a staff. I had a command sergeant major working for me, an E9.
Wow.
And I had about 15 civilians, okay? And when I first did it, everything we did was old school. It was all ledger paper, you know? And I had employees that I would give them an entity. You know, you're in charge of the officers club, as an example, and maybe one or two for that. And they would have to do all the accounting. Well, after a while, they wanted to automate it. And so I went through a conversion from a manual system to an automated system. And in those days, computers were fairly new. And it wasn't like you go on and you have a screen like you do now. It was coding sheets. So you would sit down and you do all transactions. One transaction was 1 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper.
Oh my.
Okay, and so you do all your transactions on these sheets of paper. You take the stack of papers and you go to Key Punch, and you had somebody enter them into Key Punch, and then you had somebody verify what they entered. At the end of the day, you got these big boxes of computer cards. Okay, then you take those cards down to the data center, and you give it to them, and you didn't want to drop them because they had to be in order, you know. And so then the next morning, you'd pick them up, and when you picked them up, you got your cards back, plus you got boxes of what I call green bar paper, where they printed everything out. So then when they did that, I'd bring them back to the office. We'd tear them apart by entity, and I'd hand them to the people, and they'd have to go verify that what was key punched and entered into the system was correct. And I thought, boy, this is nuts, you know. But, I mean, shortly thereafter, you know, I mean, technology grew so fast, okay, that you went from that type of system, you know, that you were the first systems I did were all mainframe systems. And you had dumb terminals, and a dumb terminal is just it's just a monitor that's connected to the mainframe. And so people would enter all their transactions there. They could look them up, but it wasn't like a PC or what you see now. And instead of doing the verification by green bar, you did it all on the monitor and stuff. And it was much, much quicker. But, time progressed, and in about 1984, PCs came out. And if you remember PCs, the very first PC I got was an IBM. It had, I think I had 512K of memory. 512K. And we had, I had 10 megabyte, I think it was, 10 megabyte discs that were, boy, they were big. They were
Like a record?
They were square, they were rectangular, and you had a slot that you'd put them in, and that's where the data went. But you only had 512K memory, so you're pretty limited. But things really rolled from there. But as things rolled, and when I left the military, I went to work for Martin Marietta. And to be honest, that's where I got my technology training, because I was working for Martin Marietta Data Systems, and I was in charge of all their finance and accounting. And the area that I worked in, we billed all the different companies within Martin. We had aerospace, we had Department of Energy, we had all kinds of contracts, okay? And so we offered computer services, and I would have to bill our computer services discreetly to all the customers. And when I was first there, some of it was manual, and some of it was automated. But as we progressed, we made things more and more and more automated. So for example, when I was first there, we had a manual accounts payable system to where we had to manually get purchase orders, purchase requests, receiving reports. We had to match everything before we could pay it. Well, one of the first things that I did there is we automated that whole process.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we did. And the first system we did it on a mainframe. But things just grew from there. Probably the biggest project that I ran in the military was we implemented a payroll system for 50,000 employees.
Wow.
This was all Martin employees, and I had a staff. Man, I think I had a staff of about 25 or 30 people, and we had people all over the country that we did that. But I did that with Martin, and then after I left Martin, I went to work for about 2 years for a consulting company called AGS. It was actually owned by AT&T. And it was a consulting company to where what we did is we would go into companies and go in with teams, and we would configure, install ERP systems, and ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning System. And I'll explain that a little bit. But what we would do is we'd go in and we would have to do the whole gamut of implement that system. And the first company I did happened to be Coors Brewery. And the software we implemented is called SAP, which is a German software. Now, what is an enterprise resource planning system? It's a software that would capture all parts of a business. So in Coors, it certainly did their accounting. And in accounting, you've got, the different modules. You have, whether it's a payroll module, accounts payable module, a billing module, whatever it is, inventory module. But then aside, the reason they call it an enterprise resource planning system, it also did all the other types of things like manufacturing and all the cost accounting and any of the other fingers that the business might be in and that they did. And so,
So it's far more than accounting.
oh yes, it's every function that a particular company would do. So, for example, I did school districts, and in school districts you have all the accounting, but then you have things like student assessment, teachers assessment, all the fingers that go along with running a school. Okay, and we did that in schools. So, so I did that. I worked for AGS for about 2 years, and then I broke off on my own. And I had networked and created a team of people. And I mean, I had MCI was one of my clients. Lucent Technologies was one of my clients. U.S. Bank, Minnesota Power and Live, Comdisco. We just had a bunch of companies, and I did school districts as well. That's how I learned. I mean, that's how I got my experience in fund accounting was primarily with school districts. And I did Littleton Public Schools, I did Denver Public Schools, I did what they call CBOCES, which is all the schools up north, whether it's Longmont, Estes Park, everything that's, up north. I did a school district in San Diego, California. I did one in eastern Pennsylvania. And I mean, that's what I did. And I did that. And I also did a lot of telecommunication stuff where I implemented systems there. So that if you're in telecommunications, not only do you have the accounting, you have all the stuff that goes along with installation, putting in routers and modems and stringing all the cable and setting all the infrastructure up so a company can do that sort of thing. So I did that. I did that for a number of years.
Very interesting.
So that's my background.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's super impressive. And so let's dig into that a little bit, folks. Right. So we're talking about it's not just the numbers and keeping a debit and a credit here. We're talking about the functionality of an entity here, right? So that's where we're at with the county, right? So the county has all these arms, like Len's talking about, all these different arms that need to be accounted for. And so the ERP system that they have, nobody's been smart enough to, right, when they first got it and Braden Wilson thought he was running it, they could barely get it to spit out a check. That's why they had to go get all kind of credit cards and do all that stuff. I mean, super embarrassing. And what's really embarrassing is that he wasn't man enough to say that he couldn't do the job. That's what's embarrassing to the people of the county, right? I mean, when you're hired to do a job, if you can't do it, I mean, say so, right? I mean, if there's one thing that you can't get, that's one thing. But like if you completely don't understand, and so let's talk a little bit, Len, if you would. So can you kind of explain what the technical challenge would be to set up one of these systems?
Yeah. Well, first of all. Custer County never did successfully implement that system. They said they did, but they didn't. Okay? So here's the process that I always went through. Now, there's many ways you can skin the cat. This is the way I did it, and this is the way I found it to be most effective. So the first thing I would do is, I'm a software agnostic. All software works the way it's designed. Is it perfect? There's no perfect software. Okay? And they all have weak areas. But when you're working with software, when you find weak areas, you create a ticket, you identify what the weak area is, you take it to the IDT department, you tell them what it is, and then they fix it. But before you implement it, you test it. So for example, I would go into a company, the very first thing I would do is I would say, let's figure out how you do business. So I'd not only interview, I'd test people, and I'd literally create flow charts that said how you process things. How do you process an invoice, for example? How do you process payroll? How do you set up a new employee? Whatever it is, I would literally map out all the processes, how you do business today. Then I would look into the software to see how it was designed. Okay? And in looking into the software, how it's designed, I have to work with the software manufacturer, if you will. And not only would I have them ask them, I'd write a set of requirements. Does it do A, B, C, D, okay? Or whatever it is. I write them out, then I say, show me. And when I say show me, I take data from the company I'm in. I take real data. Give me a stack of payments you did last month or whatever, okay? And I say, here's some data. Show me how it works in your system, okay? When in doing that, you'd find out what worked and what didn't work, okay? And then if something didn't work, you'd work with the software manufacturer to say, okay, how can we configure this? How can we take your software? What can we do to get it to work without doing, and I'm not talking about programming changes, I'm talking about setting the system up, because they all have different ways you set it up.
Well, so, and let's talk about that a little bit. That actually, so none of these systems are out of the box, ready to go. You have to logistically
You have to configure it.
So that's one of the things, folks, of what we've been talking about. We're continually talking about, we're still talking about here, is that this system at the county has not been set up properly. And so let's dig into this a little bit more. Why? Because nobody's smart enough to understand how to set it up. That's part of the problem that we've had the whole time. So, you know, I know that the IT guy has been working at it pretty hard, and our hats are off to him, but he's just out of his league. He doesn't understand what it takes to set this up, because if he did understand what it took to set it up, he would have set it up when it first was initiated however many years ago, and it's still not set up properly. So all they're doing is they're just winging it. They're just winging it enough that they can get it, they can get money to come out of it, and they can get somehow whatever they're doing with this Redlands accounting, they're somehow just barely able to get by, but it's not precise, it's not efficient, and it's surely not set up the way that it was designed, correct?
That's exactly right. So, for example, every system has within the system an account number structure. What they have is they have it set up that you can have these different elements within an accounting structure. So you look at, one of the first things I do is look at that, and then I look at the account number structure the entity currently has, and then I have to create a whole brand new accounting structure that fits into the software, okay? And there's different elements. It's more than just element of expense. Let me explain an element of expense. So when you set up an account number structure, you think of balance sheet, and in the balance sheet, there's the left-hand side, which is assets, the right-hand side, which is liabilities, and stockholders' equity, or in the county's case, it's fund balance, okay? And then you have the income statement, or in the county case, it's statement of revenues and expenses, okay? So when you set it up, they certainly have an account number structure. The element of expense would be cash in bank. Cash in bank account number 123. Cash in bank account number 345. Cash in savings, whatever. Accounts receivable, inventory, depreciation. This is all on the left-hand side of the balance sheet, okay? On the right-hand side, on the left-hand side is also accounts receivable, okay? On the right-hand side, you have accounts payable, or any deferred type of liability that's in there, and at the bottom you have your fund balance. So the left-hand side are debits, and the right-hand side are credits. And then when you go into the statement of revenue and expenses, revenues are credits and expenses are debits. See, so you can't say a debit is a plus and a credit is a minus. That's hooey. It's left and right, and that's what they mean, okay? So you have the basic elements of expense, but there's other things you want to think about. How about department? How about activity? You know, so you have to look and you have to say, okay, how do you want to track your costs? How do you want to break them down discretely? And so you set up an account number structure that has all these elements that takes you through, and it's not uncommon to have an account number structure that has multiple sections that combined could be, say, 24 bytes. Okay? And you have to know how to do that. So you have to set that up. Now, when it comes to processes, every software has what they call a workflow. Okay? And you're able to take however the software was designed and create workflows. So, and that's part of the configuration, so that when you reverse engineer how the county's going to do business, it's based upon the capability of the particular software that you use and how it's designed to develop workflow. So this all takes time. So when you set it up, it's not like you have one environment, one software environment. The environment that you use that has all your data, your pure data, is production. But then you have to have a test system. And every user has to be able to access both, because if you have to implement something, you don't just implement it. You have to put it in the test system, test it, get the output, is it working right, before you actually go into production. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, and this all takes time. You know, and not only does it take time, when you're implementing the system, the people that work in the county, they're overloaded because they have to do the daily work, plus they have to assist with the implementation. So it's, you know, I don't think I had any company that I went into that was 2 years was about the minimum that you did to implement a system, and it took cooperation from everybody. And not only did you have to have functional people, you had to have an IT department, a technology department that knew the technology. So, and there's different technologies. So, for example, if you're using an Oracle database, you would have to have an Oracle DBA. If it was an SQL, you'd have to have a SQL DBA. And you had to have people that knew what they were doing. When it came time to actually implementing, you would take whatever data that you were using to begin with, okay, and I would go in and we'd do mass changes. Using the query language, we'd write queries to say, go from this to this, you know, old account number, new account number. And we'd convert them, because at the end of the day, you've got to have everything in sync with the new system and the new system elements. So, you know, that stuff takes time, and that's assuming that you don't have issues like the credit card fiasco that hasn't been reconciled. That assumes that you have people that know how to compute payroll. You know, so for example, in the county has had payroll problems where they double paid people, okay? Completely double paid them, and well, did they take it back? Nope, they got to keep it, okay? They had an issue where they didn't withdraw, they got an increase in the benefits, like insurance and stuff, to where the cost went up, and they didn't implement the cost. And they caught it months down the road. And rather than have the employees catch up, the employee said, wow, I can't afford that. I didn't plan on that.
Right.
So the taxpayers paid for that. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the county that they're really not fixing. I mean, there was an issue. This was you've been going to the BOCC meetings. This has been 3 or 4 weeks ago. The sheriff's office.
yeah.
The sheriff's office got 1.1 or 1.2 million in donated equipment from the military. Okay, what are they going to do with it? One of the commissioners who's in charge of the accounting said, "Oh, we're gonna write it off and zero it out immediately. We're gonna debit revenue and credit expense." And I go, "Whoa, you can't do that." And in fact, I emailed one of the commissioners immediately. I tried to do it during the meeting, but because I was on YouTube, they didn't see it. But you have to amortize all those assets that they gave him. You have to figure out what is the fair market value. You've got to create asset categories, and on the balance sheet, you put them on as assets, whatever they are. And the other side of it would be fund balance, because it's increasing your equity because they gave you this. Now, I was told, well, I'll tell Vern to take care of that. I'll let Vern know.
Oh.
But if you go back to 2023, they got a qualified audit because this is what they were doing with all their leases. And GASB 87 says, no. You've got to amortize those leases.
What is the definition, Lynn, of amortized?
Okay, so I'll try and make it real simple. You buy a truck, okay? And you buy a truck for $20,000, okay? And the truck, you're going to replace it every 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, this $20,000 truck has a $3,000 salvage value, okay? And so what you're going to do is you're going to depreciate that truck over that 5-year life cycle, showing a $3,000 salvage value. So when you do it, you don't, and you make a payment every month, you probably bought it on time. So your payment, a portion of it goes to principal, a portion of it goes to interest, and then you also have to do an entry that reduces the value of that asset. That's amortization.
I see.
Whether it's it's a non-cash flow item. It's depreciation or amortization. Vehicles you usually depreciate. Okay, software you amortize.
I see.
Okay, because software goes down in value, just like everything else. Okay, so GASB 87 mandated that all tangible leases, and now it's intangible as well, have to be amortized over the life cycle of the lease. And the way you do it, you get a lease, and let's say it's a 10-year lease for $10,000 a year. That's a $100,000 lease, okay? Well, let's say you're paying $10,000 a year for that lease. Well, what's the liability of that lease? The way you create the liability is you take the annual payment and convert it to its present value. And you have to do that for every year. And when you add up the present value over the life cycle of all 10 of those payments, it gives you the liability to that lease. And then you create an amortization table. Okay, so your payment is this, just like before. Your so much goes to principal, so much goes to interest. Okay, and then you amortize it by, you would debit an amortization expense. Okay, and the offset would be to reducing, accumulating the total amortization expense. Okay, so that's the way that works. So this county has had the same auditor. I've read every audit report since 2011. And 2011 cites findings that go back to 2010, and the same auditor did before that. So, bare minimum, we've had the same auditor for 15 years. Okay? Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2005 literally mandates that best practices are you change auditors no later than every 5 years. And the auditors really check upon the auditors.
Well, and so let's talk a little bit about that too, Lynn. So, a lot of what would the findings in them audits have to do with the controls of the county, don't it? Isn't there a lot of recurring stuff on them audits that say your procedures are not up to snuff to keep track of what you?
You know, it's interesting you asked that, Steve. Sarbanes-Oxley, as well as the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act of 1977, mandates that all public and governmental entities have adequate internal controls. Sarbanes-Oxley mandates that auditors coming in are supposed to audit internal controls. The auditor that we've had, for every audit report that I've seen, has a statement right at the beginning that says they're not going to make any opinion. They're not going to address any internal controls. Now, here's what I'll tell you. Custer County doesn't have. It's got maybe 2 policies and procedures I can find. One is the purchasing, and the other's on how to write grants. But they don't have any procedures for paying an invoice, for checks that are not part of the regular process, for making payments to invoices, any of that stuff.
Simple stuff.
They should have a boatload of policies and procedures, okay? And they don't have any. And in these policies and procedures should contain all the internal controls. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act mandates that you not only have the internal controls, but you have them documented in flowcharts. And wherever there's an internal control, you put a big arrow in this flowchart and you number it, and then you have a sheet of paper that explains the internal control. Okay? Custer County not only doesn't have any internal controls, they don't have any policies and procedures.
And all of this is kind of categorized on the ERP system.
The ERP system should be configured to comply with the policies and procedures.
So it's not necessarily a record of the procedures, but the procedures should drive how that
Is configured. It's how it's configured. That's exactly what happens. And Custer County doesn't have any. Now I have in fact I can actually show you that I have a list of findings here since 2010. These are audit findings, okay? So for example, first one I have is posting public welfare fund transactions are not posted consistently. That finding is in every year except 2023. The auditor identifies the error. The auditor has never identified if it's been fixed or how it's been fixed. Okay? Consistency of recording expenditures. You know, are they recording expenditures in the right bucket? They've had a finding on this every year that they haven't done that consistently. Okay? Maintaining records. Here. Maintaining records of federal and other grants. This drives me nuts. Yeah. Because about 60% of Custer County monies coming in are funded by grants. Okay? And Custer County grants are the easiest and simplest grants that you can have. They're grants where you apply for a grant and you get approved for a grant, and before you're reimbursed, all you have to do is spend the money, submit an invoice, and show that the money you spent it on adheres to the grant requirements, and then the government issues you, the grantor issues you reimbursement for it. So all you have to do is have a file that says, on this date, the grant was approved, and you have a file with the grant, and then you have the amount of the grant, and then you say, on this day, we spent this much, and on this day, they reimbursed it, and the balance of the grant is A minus B, okay? They've never done that. And I don't know why they've never done it, and it continues to be a problem, and it's about as simple as it is, and
Well, and that might deal with potential clawbacks too, right? If we're not spending that money properly or we don't keep track of it properly, if they claw it back, they can
well,
force us to pay it back.
the grantor keeps a good record. So the grantor will say, it was approved here, and this is how much we've reimbursed you, and this is how much is left. But can the grantor come to the grantee, the county, and say, show me your file. Show me how you've kept track of that. The auditor has come out every year and said, you don't have those files and you need to do it. Yet they keep writing grants.
What? Something that kind of comes to mind, Lynn. Why? Where is the teeth? This Sarbanes-Oxley. Where is the oversight? I mean, if there's a law that states that they're supposed to do, so correct me here or help me paint the picture. So the Sarbanes-Oxley, they're actually telling you that you have to do this, but is it just a recommendation or is it actually a law?
No, Sarbanes-Oxley really mandates that. Now, with my firm, we always complied. If they want to come in and audit us, it was open the door, let them in. We didn't care. I personally do not understand how the auditor is getting away with this. There was a meeting, and Jimmy, you might have been there when I asked him, what are you doing on internal controls? So we don't do internal controls. Okay? And they don't mention all the issues that go along. So for example, you can't find one audit report that addressed the cancellation of the credit cards. And I know I bet my house that they haven't fixed the credit card.
No, I'm sure of that. I mean, otherwise,
They're using credit cards as a purchasing system. The way it normally works, okay, is you need to buy something. Road and Bridge wants to buy a truck. So the first they say, I've got a budget, whatever it is. I want to put in a purchase request to buy a truck. So I put in a purchase request to buy a truck, and then it has to go through the process of getting approved. Do we have the budget for it? And so if you're going to buy a truck, you say, well, which truck are you going to buy? Well, I'm going to buy a Ford 150. Well, where am I going to buy it from? Well, let's go out and get some bids. So you probably want to get a minimum of 3 bids. When you finally say, okay, we've got a budget to buy the Ford 150 for this amount of money, we're going to buy it from this company. Now we're going to issue the purchase order to buy it. So now you've got a purchase request that's gone through the process that ensures you have the money. It assigns the account number. It gets all the approval signatures of the people that need to approve it. And then you do bids and then you get a purchase order. So now you got a purchase order plus a purchase request. Okay. Next thing you do is you go purchase the truck. Okay. But you don't pay for it until you get it. So you got the purchase order, the invoice, what it's going to cost, and you have the receiving report. You receive the truck. Now you can pay it. So when it comes to accounts payable, it's called a 3-way match. This is an internal control. So if I'm the accounts payable clerk or the accounts payable manager, whoever's doing it, you say, I've got the 3 elements. Okay, I can now cut the check.
Got it.
Okay, and that's the way it should be.
Well, I mean, that seems totally reasonable. I mean, one of the things that we talk about a lot here is why, why is there such a disconnect between private business and private business practice in the way that they run our public money? Why
There shouldn't be.
Yeah, and why, I mean, so is there any, I guess kind of back to my initial question there with the Sarbanes-Oxley, is that kind of, I mean, is there any teeth to that, to where at some point if they don't pay attention, or I mean, are they going to be criminally liable for not following that, or is it is it a little too loose for that?
No. If you go back, and if you remember Enron, Arthur Andersen was the #1 accounting firm at that time, and there was a big 8. Arthur Andersen was at the top of the list. Arthur Andersen got caught not doing this stuff. Arthur Andersen is no longer in business.
Took him out.
They pulled all their licenses, they pulled everything, and they're gone. So there certainly is risk that if you should be complying with it. I don't understand for the life of me. I know this. I know one of the partners in this audit firm. I think he's a nice man. For the life of me, I can't understand why he's not
Well, and so
auditing this.
let's kind of dig this apart, or take this apart here. So if the auditor tells them, okay, you need to do this, but yet that they won't do it, then where does that leave us?
Well, if they're not doing it, they can be reported to the Department of Regulatory Agencies. They step in, and if they're not complying with generally accepted auditing principles and accounting principles, they get their license.
That's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear that term. And to me, that's where we're completely missing it. That's why when our auditor comes up here, he can't make heads or tail of what they got going on there. They got cowboy stuff happening in there. But it's not, what did you just say? It's an acceptable accounting?
It's not in accordance with generally accepted. They're required. Okay, the government is required to GASB, Governmental Accounting Standards Board.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different than GAAP. It's kind of the same, only it's GASB. They have to comply, and if they don't comply, they're subject to penalties. They're subject to all this stuff.
So the regulating entity that enforces that, is that a federal or a state?
Well, you have Department of Regulatory Agencies, which is every state has their own. Okay, in Colorado it's DORA. Okay, and they not only handle every different type of license. There are CPAs, attorneys, plumbers, all of that stuff.
So who would actually be liable, right, if the county doesn't actually have an accountant or a CPA, a licensed person that's taking care of that? Who then is responsible?
Well, DORA's not gonna hit your employee. DORA's gonna hit the auditor. DORA's gonna come after the auditor, not. Quite frankly, I have a lot of empathy for Custer County trying to hire an accountant, because to get the right person up here, you need somebody that's, you don't have to be a CPA to be a good accountant, okay? You have to be a CPA to, say, be an auditor, okay? But you have to have accounting, you have to be a good accountant, which can come through experience, okay? And you also need some education, but you also need to have the experience. And I mean the experience not only doing accounting, but working in a governmental entity doing government fund accounting, and then you also have to have some technical expertise on how to run the tools. I mean, it's just like a carpenter. If a carpenter doesn't know how to use the different saws and drills and all this kind of stuff, they're not going to be much of a carpenter.
Right.
Okay, and they may know geometry real good, which is required, but you need to have some technical expertise in this day and age. Even down at the clerical level, you need people that can run database queries, depending on the language that they use, whether they use SQL or Oracle or whatever it is, because when you're looking for problems, the quickest way to do it is to do a query against a database. You know, it says find this transaction that between these dates that or between these dollars or whatever, and return it, and you get a list. And you're not sitting going through a pile trying to figure out what's there. You do it smarter than that in today's technology.
Sort of a search engine, so to
Yeah,
speak.
that's exactly what it is. But you have to be smart enough to be able to write the queries in whatever language that they're using.
And so potentially one of the things that's going on there would be if there's 15 different accounts going across trying to do these queries. That's what you were talking about initially with that initial startup and testing the system to make sure that when you're doing a query for the road and bridge, this particular setup, that is addressed right, and then the next one is the
It returns the data the way you expect it to be returned.
It's got to have a practical application. It has to be used in accordance to how they're manually doing it, and then it's converted into.
And this kind of stuff really doesn't happen overnight.
No.
And so I mean, you all know, I offered my services, okay, to do it, and I offered my services pro bono, but that doesn't mean it would be free, because it's not something I could do alone. I would have to bring in a staff that knew what they were doing, and we'd work as a team to get it done as quickly as possible. You know,
And that would have got at least the ship uprighted
yes,
and got a foundation established, and maybe educated a few of the people that we have in there, and it would have raised the standard of accounting. And that's just we still haven't done that.
So let's dig in a little bit here to maybe some of the reasons why. I mean, let's try to theorize here why they wouldn't allow this to happen.
it wasn't that they. I don't think it wasn't that they wouldn't allow it. I think they said, okay, we want to go get this person, but we're going to pay him a nickel when the real charge is $20. You know?
Yeah.
They made statements like, we can't hire somebody that makes more money than I do. I'll just give you an example. My daughter-in-law has a master's degree in accounting from the University of Denver. Okay? She's really good. Okay? But she's an SEC specialist. That's her, accountants specialize in different things. So she's not a specialist in implementing system, but she's a specialist in taking the company public. Okay? Which is similar because you have a specialty. She works at home. She goes to the office maybe one day a month. Okay? And she makes $260 a year. If you were to ask her to come up and do this, she'd laugh in your face. Why would I do that? And I can tell you that to work in this county, to do what needs to be done, you can't do this remotely. And Lisa Heeman's working a lot of time remotely. This is hands-on, everyday, sustained, intense for a minimum of 2 years.
So back to trying to paint the picture here. Why do you think, Len, that they didn't want you to I mean, we all have our theories, it seems apparent to me now that they just don't want anybody in there because they're doing some stuff that is devious.
I don't know that if that's the truth. I think the problem with me was, if I'm honest, was a personality conflict between me and the commissioner that I would have had to go through, because I was going to go in and I was going to be completely transparent. Whatever I found, the public was going to know.
Absolutely.
Well,
Okay.
and
And-
that's what leads us to believe that.
And they, at the time this commissioner was brand new. I don't understand it, because he'd have been made out to be a hero, because it would have happened on his watch after he came in and got things cleaned up.
Well, and that's the thing, Lynn. I mean, I hate to try to point fingers, and we're not here to point fingers. We're about solutions, addressing a problem and trying to find a solution.
Absolutely.
If you've offered to do something that's so technically advanced as to design this ERP system and test it on all the different categories and get this bad boy up and running properly, I mean, the only thing that kind of comes to my mind of why they wouldn't want to do that is I mean, I understand the personality conflict there, but I mean,
Well, Steve, I don't think they understood, or even now understand, the complexity. I think that they think anybody can be a bean counter.
well, and that's what we're trying to do here, folks. We're trying to. I mean, I wrote a pretty good article a while back in the Sentinel about some of the stuff about these procedures and the audits and all of that, and we're circling back around here because what's important here. I mean, there's a lot at stake, right? I mean, you already spoke that we're at risk from the Sarbanes-Oxley,
yeah.
right? We're at risk, folks, because we're not doing it right, and these people. We'll talk about the CRCC here in a minute, or the CCRCC accounting here in a little bit, but it's that same thing of where they just don't feel like they have to, well, we're so small we don't have to do it, or they just feel like they're above the law. And I mean, it's really irritating to me when someone of your caliber offers your expertise. I mean, pro bono, I mean, yeah, it would have cost some, but I mean, how much is it costing us on the audit? Because they can't keep it, it's not clear enough. They got to come in and sort all that stuff out. I mean, there's so much going on and waste. They're wasting so much all the way along the line. I don't understand how. I mean, your offering to the county would have been way cheaper than any other option that exists to get the job done properly. And the fact of the matter that they won't do that. I mean, it really is hard to believe, folks. I mean, obviously, Len, from some of his experience, and he gave you part of his background. I mean,
We have a gym. I mean, we have a gym in the valley that we didn't use. I mean, Lenny is priceless.
and so it just leads us to believe. I mean, I'm not trying to create suspicion here, but there's definitely something suspicious of why. I mean, I can understand maybe there was a little personal conflict there, or personality conflict, but I mean, geez, we're talking about dealing with the public's business. We're all grown men and women here. This, put your big boy pants on and let's get to business. This whole, well, I have a problem with your personality, so I don't want you to do it. To me, that's not any kind of a logical excuse whatsoever.
None. And this is a lot of what's going on. And the liberals use it quite a bit. And it's called political correctness. And you can't raise your voice. You can't disagree. Otherwise, you're at odds with us, and now you're causing us to feel uneasy. That is the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. But that's how they roll. That's a tactic, and that's how they stiff arm and insulate things. So,
I mean, to me, it's one thing after another. They did this lease for the judicial building. Are you aware of that? Okay, so
We've been telling everybody about that.
They did a 10-year lease, okay, here I converted it to comply with GASB 87, but they got, and I didn't write down, the total was about $860,000, and the guy that owned the land said, okay, I'll give you a donation of like $260, which would give him a tax credit. And he says, you pay $50,000 over, I think it was, is it 10 years?
Believe so.
Yeah, 10 years, $50,000 over 10 years. And then in the 11th year, you pay a small interest of like $32,000. So they paid with interest $581,962, and the land appraised at the time they purchased and created the lease at $129,762. So for me, I don't understand this. I don't understand, why would you pay 4.5 times something? I bet they could have come up with an interest rate with a bank to buy it at $129,000, $130,000 at a lower interest rate and pay it off in a lot less than 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Why did they do that? I don't even know if the public is aware of this. We stumbled into this.
We did stumble into this, and this is how hidden it's been. And we've talked about this, folks, before, and I'm going to go over it again. So the planning and zoning head, just recently within the last 3 months, I mean, I don't know the time frame, but I know that hadn't been very long ago. One of our key constituents was talking with the head of planning and zoning. And she mentioned, she actually, got kind of adamant and stood up. She says, I know that they donated it to us. So the department, the head of planning and zoning,
Thinks they got it for free?
for the last 7-8 years, she thinks that they got it for free.
Oh no. And here's the other thing. If you, somebody did a Cora request, I don't know who did it, but asked for payments that they made. The payments that they've been making on this land do not match the lease purchase agreement. It's more. I don't know what's going on with it.
Well, and that lends us back to this whole big circle that we're talking about of why it seems very reasonable why they would try to push off something like, well, it's a personality conflict for you not to look at it, because in my opinion, what's really going on here is there is some underhanded stuff that's going on at the financial level that they don't want us to see. It's obvious that's what's going on here.
Well, they have a Justice Center committee right now, okay? They are planning on building a Justice Center on this land, okay? Now, I think it was 2018 when it was voted on. It was 65-35 against.
Yeah, and so they did that again in 22 as well.
And the public doesn't even know what's going on.
Well, and that's the ornery part too. So I mean, we've been pretty diligent here, especially the last 3 weeks, about trying to uncover this and expose this whole. Even though that so I talked to somebody out on the street and I say, "What do you know about the Justice Center?" "Oh, we voted that down." Right, and I mean that's like the end of the story, right? I mean, we voted it down, it's over. But no, I mean, you talk to Commissioner Kanda, and he says it's we're doing it.
Well, Kanda's also saying that the state of Colorado is mandating that they do it. Now, I'm not sure what he's referring to, but I'm not aware of any state that can tell you have to build a Justice Center.
Well, and we've dug into that pretty hard, right? So that's the whole definition of a mandate. They're trying to tell us a mandate. I mean, they're basically trying to pull the wool over our eyes, and there's a very revealing document on the internet. What is it, Jimmy? It's 11/20/23, correct?
23 or 22 on the YouTube thing.
That's 23. Yeah, and we're going to post this, folks, on the website so that you can look at it. But this interaction, this recording between Bill Kanda, Lucas Epp, Kevin Day, Rich Smith, Ann Barthrop, and Paige Phillips, the gentleman from RJA, Riley Johnson and Associates. We looked at this, and one of the real troubling things for me with that was they kept saying, well, we got to sell it. You know, that's Bill's biggest thing, is we got to try to sell this. And it's like, if we really needed it and it was justified, you wouldn't have to try to sell it. It's like trying to sell ice to an Eskimo, right? We don't need any ice, pal. We're in the Klondike.
We're good. So and Steve and I wrote down here that it was a pretty good meeting, and it was 11/20/23.
Yeah, 11/20/23. You can find that. So the best thing to do is go on YouTube. We're going to post it on the website, right, so you can get it. But you can go on YouTube and type in Custer County, Colorado, BOCC meeting 11/20/23, and you will go right to this meeting between Bill Kanda, Lucas Epp, Kevin Day, Ann Barthrop, Rich Smith, and Paige Phillips. And like I said, so I took a few notes out of that, and one of the things that was really alarming to me was they're talking about they're wanting to build this as the same size as Alamosa. And so Paige was talking about, and I actually talked to Paige here. He called us. We've been trying to get a hold of him. He was gracious enough to call us back. I actually didn't have some of the questions that Jimmy did, but I talked to Paige probably about 15 minutes. Real nice guy. I mean, you know, they're in the business of designing justice centers. That's what they do all around Colorado, Wyoming, or whatever. And he was proceeding to tell me about something that happened in Conejos County, where Riley Johnson Architecture knows that they're getting in over their head, then people can't afford it. But the county commissioners are saying, no, we'll just keep going. Well, in Conejos County, they basically spent a bunch of money trying to get it all planned out, and they could never afford it. So they wasted the money that's what they're trying. That's basically what's going on here. So this is a couple of the facts that I dug out of it. So they're trying to build us a justice center that would be the same as Alamosa. Okay, Alamosa County. Actually, it might be Rio Grande County. No, actually, I think it is Alamosa County. Alamosa, the town of Alamosa is big enough. It's got a college in it, Adams State, right? I mean, it's a pretty good sized town. I think that it said it had 9,000 people in the town. Well, the county has 16,655 people in the county. So they're basically almost 4 times bigger than we are, but yet our committee, our Justice Center committee, is trying to build us a jail that's the same size as Alamosa's. And it don't make no sense. They're talking about this brand new facility would have a 60-seat courtroom. And so I don't know how long it's been since you all been into the courtroom over here. It'll sure hold 60 people, guaranteed. I guarantee you that the courtroom that we already have will seat 60 besides the jury and the rest of the participants of the court. So why are they trying to build something that big? And I mean, here they are, you're trying to build you a courtroom in a courthouse that'll seat 60 people, but we already have that. And I'm just like, this makes no sense to somebody that has to pay for it. It makes perfect sense if you're somehow trying to make money off of it. And that's what we've been saying all along. How And why are these people so adamant about spending our money on something that we don't need? The only thing that makes sense is that they have to be trying to get money off of it. It's the only logical reason, because and Bill has been gracious enough. I've asked him a few times, and we're hopefully going to get him on within the next month or 6 weeks. I mean, Rich Smith is the same, gracious enough. From my understanding, I don't think that Mr. Smith is. I think that meeting that he was on was just because they required him to be on it, being he was the sheriff. I don't know that.
Well, if I could say something, if we go back to they paid like 48 grand to get the plans for the original one. And they said it was 18 million and they were going to fund it through increase in sales tax. Okay? I recall it was like a 2% increase. Okay? Something like that. And it was voted down 65-35. Well, first of all, just because you build a building and you got the jails and you got everything else, that's just the beginning.
Well, that's where it starts.
That's right. Because then you're mandated to have nurses and you have extra employees, and then all these people have to be trained. And everything has to be maintained. So that's going to be an ongoing cost. The sales tax increase isn't going to cover all of that.
No, and that's something that's super deceptive too, Len, is once we got this, right, so all of the stuff, they tell us that it's 2%, but when you read through it's right in this document here. When you read through this, it goes on to tell you that they're going to increase the mill. The sales tax ain't going to cut it at all. There's a hell of an increase with your normal tax rate on the mill levy. And so that's the thing. It's like, if this thing is so good and so needed, why are they having to lie about it?
Well, in all honesty, they did say that they were going to rent the jail out. They were going to create revenue by housing prisoners from other counties. Okay? And I think, at least from my perspective and the people I talked to, we said, no. We don't want to have that. We don't want to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, for what we're paying Fremont County, from my understanding, I mean, I don't know that this is the case, but I heard $50 a day is what the inmates cost us to go to Canyon. So how are you going to make it? At $50 a night, you can't even hardly get a Roach Motel for that, right? So how are they going to pay off a $20 million Justice Center?
Well, that's why you'd ask them. What they should do before they decide anything is to show a pro forma of the cost and the ongoing cost, and then the money that's going to come in.
And this is once you start looking at the big picture and all the moving parts, that's why a CPA, a certified public accountant that can look at all these numbers and do projections and look at the big picture and be able to present it correctly. Am I right or wrong? Is that?
Well, I'm going to tell you, you don't need a CPA.
You really don't, but it'd be handy.
Well, you need finance people. So for example, I've been a CPA for 40 years. I do not manage my own portfolio. I pay somebody.
You pay someone to do
I
that.
pay somebody to do it because that's not my area of expertise. And the guy I pay is, I think they're called CMPs or CME. He's got a certification in finance, and this is what he does. And I can tell you that he does a great job, and my portfolio always looks pretty decent, But I don't do it. I monitor him. I monitor him on a daily basis, but I don't do it. He does it. Yeah, I mean, look, you don't go to a dentist to get heart surgery.
No.
It's the same type of thing. You got to get people that specialize in what area you're in. And I think what we're trying to do here is we're trying to be a big boy in big boy pants, and we're not big boys.
Well, and so let's talk a little bit about what they're trying to do with this finance. So what I know about it is what I read from George Gramlich's article last week in the Sentinel that talks about what happened at the BOCC meeting. Bill wants to keep looking for an accountant. Lucas says no. We're gonna. Lucas says no. We're gonna. Vern is gonna do it.
He's gonna. Yeah, they did. I listened to that. They do want to hire Vern, and personally, I don't think it's fair to the county, and I certainly don't think it's fair to Vern. Vern does not have the qualifications to do that, and listen. I think he's a real nice man, and I think he works really hard, and he's well intentioned, and he'll give you the best he's got. But you know, if you've got a truck and it's stuck in the Georgia mud, spinning its wheels, it's working hard, but it ain't going nowhere, and that's what I see.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, Lynn. What would be your what would be your answer to if you had went in there and configured the system properly? Could someone of Vern's capabilities control the ship after that you'd set it up?
I don't want to say no, but boy, it'd take a lot of work on his part. I mean, not only would he have to work, he'd have to go get some education. He'd have to be part of it, and you'd have to really train him. I mean, the first thing you have to do is, you know, you got to get the house built correctly. Maintaining it once you build it is a different story, and maintaining it is still a lot of work, but it's not like building it. So what should the county do? I don't think the county is going to be able to find anybody that, I mean, they're going to have to pay somebody minimum $300,000 to come in, and the person that comes in is not going to want to sustain it. There's too much going on, and it's a lot of work. They might stay for a while, and you might be able to get somebody tied into a contract that says, we'll give you a bonus, but it's based upon performance to lock them in. Okay, once you get it configured, then I think you could hire somebody at much less salary, but they all have to be trained, and it's not a one-man job. I think the auditor's been telling them for years that you need somebody running it +3, and they don't want to hear that. That's too much money, you know.
Yeah, they're busy spending it on a wood chipper.
Well, you know, these guys are not businessmen.
Right.
They've never ran a business, and doggone it. I mean, here's another analogy. Nikola Jokic makes $50 million a year. Michael Malone doesn't make near that, and he's the boss.
Right.
So that's perfectly, that's what I mentioned in a meeting one time, and boy, I got attacked. They said, well, they can't make more than me. I'm like, well, number one, you're thoroughly overpaid as a commissioner, and number two, that's the hub of the whole county is the finance department. And if we're not running that correctly and don't have transparency, the money we would have saved just with the auditor, not counting hiring Lisa and some other inputs, we could probably afford, you know, a pretty decent person, but they won't advertise it.
Jimmy, auditor is a mandate. They can't get out of having an auditor.
But that's the control joint. That's the big control joint to me, because the Department of Local, it's DORA, regulatory agency, governs that person's license, and that person has to perform under the law, just like a plumber. A plumber has to perform under the law, and if you don't, your license can be taken, you can be fined. But it causes you to be a little bit harder on the people, I think, that you're doing the audit for. I just think we got such a mess here that this auditor is just going, wow, how do we ever get past this? And I don't know that we would have ever got a qualified audit until the $50,000 walked out the door.
You know, we should have been getting qualified audits for years, in my opinion. Okay, I mean, how do you fix this thing? You know, what if somebody came in as a forensic auditor? Somebody that wasn't going to play the politics, somebody was going to come in and take care of the citizens and did a complete forensic audit and did more than financial, but did operational as well.
Yeah.
And identified this stuff.
Yeah.
To where there could be no more hiding. That would be a beginning, I think, to get that done. And then, I mean, they've got an immense mountain to climb. And by the way, I am no longer willing to come in and do anything for this county. I'm old enough that I'm just not going to do it anymore. It's over for me.
No, I don't blame you. I watched
I don't blame you
I
either.
watched the slap you got in the face from that other group of people, and I'm telling you, I cannot believe, and that's the cabal outside the cabal, is what
Well,
I
and
call it.
so we don't have a whole lot of time left, but if we could, Lynn, would you mind kind of going through a little bit of what's happened at the Custer County Republican Central Committee?
Well, okay, so this has been probably the end of November, beginning of December. I got a call from Jack Canterbury. And Jack told me that, the people were coming after him and, he was going to retire. This was his last hurrah, and he needed to make sure that all the finances were in order and complied with the campaign finance laws.
Yep.
Okay, and he said, he'd been trying to get the data, and what you have in the Republican committee here in Custer County, to me, it's a cat fight. It's a bunch of immature people that don't want to get along, and they've all got their own agendas, and all they do is point the finger, and nobody really tries to do anything. I do think Jack wanted to find out because, first of all, he would be personally liable.
Right.
Okay, so he asked me if I wouldn't do an analysis, really an audit, but to do an audit, you have to have a system that you're auditing. And I asked, Jack gave me a stack of papers. This is all I got. No check register, no journals, no nothing. That he did give me some bank statements. And so I went in and I did an analysis. And there were three things to consider. First of all, the detailed data they gave me, the bank statements that they gave me, and the data that's in the state that they have. They're mandated to put all their contributions and their expenses in a system called Tracer. Okay? And so as I looked at it, I said, which one should I look at and say is the baseline? I chose the bank. I trusted the bank. The bank's got deposits, it's got withdrawals, and I could get it to balance. So I said, okay, that's the basis that I'm going to start with. I created an Excel workbook. I can't remember, but there's probably 13 different sheets, if you know what a workbook is. And I detailed all the revenue by type, whether it was fundraising or Lincoln Day, what do they call it? Lincoln Day something, pie sale, all this other stuff. And so I compiled everything and I put it in a report and I summarized it. And my summary report balances to Tracer to the penny. To the penny. Contributions, which is revenue, as well as expenses. In doing so, I found a whole bunch of variances. I found checks that I could identify discreetly that were not in Tracer. I could identify checks that were paid without supporting documentation. In other words, just a check written to Joe somebody for an amount. What's it for? It might annotate it was for XYZ, but there was no invoice, nothing there. Okay. So I was able to discreetly identify that stuff, and I was able to identify it. Now, when it came to contributions, The detail they gave me, they had different categories. And I created a spreadsheet per category, line item, the name, the amount, the date, the whole 9 yards, based on the information they gave me. When I compiled everything, the contributions in Tracer, some of the contributions matched the detailed data, and a lot did not. They created whole new different categories. Okay? Now, when I start looking at contributions, I said, well, let me verify it to the bank statement. So, for example, I had a sheet for Lincoln Day ticket sales that I had like 6 signatures of people that submitted or endorsed ratified the amount of money taken. And it was so much here for this and it totaled up. Well, would you expect to see a deposit for that amount?
You would think.
Okay. The deposits in the bank, not one time could I reconcile them to the categories they gave me for when they took the money. So there are still variances. Don't hold me to this, but it seems to me like the bank said total deposits in 2024 were $19,780 or something. Okay. Tracer has something like 18,104. And the detail has 18,000, I don't know, I'm making this up, 600 or something. But there's variances. I could tell them what they needed to do to correct the expenses. But when it comes to the revenue, there's no way for me to, I don't have the data to reconcile that. So they're out of balance. Now, I presented this report on January 9th, and I got creamed. I mean, I was yelled at.
Well, and I will say,
Atrocious.
we were there. I was there. I have that on recording. And in my opinion, Lynn, I mean, everything that you did was upright and professional. I mean, you didn't come at anybody. You didn't throw anybody under the bus. I mean, you just basically were there to help and say, hey, look, this is what I've found. I have the qualifications to make an honest opinion. I definitely know what I'm talking about, far more than any of you. But yet you got riddled over some stuff that says, well, we're tired of you trying to come at somebody and hurt somebody's feelings. And that's what we're talking about here, folks. The people that are in charge of our money are so derelict and neglect that it's beyond comprehension. They don't feel that it's important. They don't feel that they're liable. They have no concept of morality of public money. And it's the same at the CCRCC as it is at the county. The fiduciary responsibility is zero.
Ethics. It comes down to ethics.
And it does come to ethics. And that's the thing. When you talk to one of them, they'll tell you, well, I mean, we literally had one of the PCPs tell us, this has been 3 or 4 months ago, she tried to get, Jack brought in some of the state campaign people.
Yeah, the head of Republican Party, the state people. Yeah.
And the young gentleman, Weston Eimer, he, on record, tells one of the PCPs, she tries to tell him, well, that we don't have to let you see that money. And he's like, yeah, you do. It's public money. What part of public don't you understand? And that's the whole problem here, folks, is these people think that they can treat our public money like their own little private little show. And that's why we got Len to come on here this evening, so that you can kind of understand the layout and the picture, the scenario of where we're at with this and how they're treating you. It's a reflection on you, the people. We, the people. These people are not taking care of business like they've been elected to do. This is not a voluntary position. That's one of the another things that really irritated me with some of the. I mean, the whole thing with the Republican Party is atrocious. I mean, there's emails going back and forth that, I mean, this is junior high type stuff. I mean, name calling, pointing the finger, all of this stuff over something that's so simple as we're trying to raise money for a candidate to go to the national. I mean, we're talking about a federal entity. It's the Republican Party, folks.
Well, I might just add, they have an attorney coming after me right now.
So that's how silly this is that Len offers his services on behalf of the chair. The chair he holds the hammer. So they basically wouldn't give him the information. They try to treat him. I mean, they just don't think they need to be responsible for the money. So when Jack tries to make it cover his end, because he's responsible personally for the tracer. So if something goes wrong, he's the chair of the Custer County Republican Committee. He is liable. So when he tries to cover himself, he gets Len to check it out because Len is an expert in his field. Len comes back and says, you know, it wasn't like, oh, we're accusing you of this or any of that. I mean, I thought it was a very professional, all he was really saying is like, this is what you could do a little better to keep track of what you're doing, right? It's like
it was data, and to me, the data speaks for itself. And just so the public knows, I did this all pro bono.
Yeah.
So it was an A+ report that was given. It was so professional. It was like a diamond in a goat's ass.
And so yeah,
that's why I'm saying he is the gem. And what he did for us and for that group of people, for them to have done what they have done to this man,
to bring a lawsuit,
it is so beyond. It's something you can't even imagine. But here again, you got inadequate people trying to do some things that they shouldn't even volunteered for is part of the problem.
Well, and that's the thing is that that's another one of the big sticklers for me is they try to say, well, our volunteer, my co-volunteer, you might have been the only one at that position at that specific point in time that you think you volunteered for it. But it's an elected position. This is not voluntary. This is not the soup kitchen at the local church. This is nothing to do with volunteering anything. This is elected positions. It has teeth. Jack can get in serious trouble with the state for campaign finance law. And these people have no regard for that whatsoever, but yet they're gonna sick an attorney on Len because he offered to help his services for his party?
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
I sure would like to have some of them people on here.
Well, and that's the thing. That
you're invited, so come on down.
Yeah, there's no way that any of them will ever come on here. I mean, the fact that someone is going to tell the one of the campaign finance people that they don't deserve to look at the money. Like, who do you think you are? Where do you think you're coming from to say something like that?
And there is another thing going on too. Is the treasurer Virginia's training her replacement. I mean, that's an elected deal. There's a lot of hogwash going on. But yeah, there's a lot of goofy stuff taking place.
Well, and so
that's why we're doing this podcast.
Well, it is why we're doing this podcast. And so we'll finish with this, folks. It's getting about time. I'm sure everybody's heard enough of ranting and raving, but the true power that the Republican, the Custer County Republican Central Committee, the power that they hold is if an elected official, if one of the commissioners, something happens to one of the commissioners, they can pick a replacement. That's what happened with the recall. The committee picks the replacement. So that's really the only power that they have. And so why are they acting so deviously and so foolishly and to the point where they're going to bring a lawsuit against Len for doing something that the chair asked him to do?
Unbelievable.
He never spoke bad. I have the recording. right? And so that means Len's attorney has the recording. So what we're talking about here is that all we did was Len took the graciousness and you know, was gracious enough to help us for free. And then he gets in a lawsuit.
In the value of what what Len did, I don't know what somebody would have charged him for that.
That was a $10,000 report.
It's a $10,000 gift that was given to us to assist us to accommodate Tracer and make sure we didn't get a fine from Griswold and come down here and wreck the Republican Party. He stepped up and gave a huge service, and then he got thrown under the bus. Unbelievable.
So back to what we always say, folks. I mean, we're trying to bring you unbiased happenings in the county. We need help here. It's going to take numbers to overcome this stuff. So I mean, we're relying on you folks to make this happen. That's what's important. Also, as well, by no means are we trying to come at anyone or speak anything that's untrue. And if by chance we do somehow get our information wrong, we're more than willing to retract that and make an apology, because that's not where we're coming from. We're here for solutions. But the problem is, I mean, the problem is it's the people's ethics is what's the matter here, folks. That's what the problem is.
Absolutely.
And so with that being said, Len, we sure do appreciate you this evening.
You bet.
Yeah, you
Thanks,
bet,
Yeah,
buddy.
Lenny, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.
And that
right on.
being said, we'll sign off and we'll see everyone next week.
Thanks. Good night.